Hi there. I'm Jainalka Collado from Earthster, and I'm head of account management. And it's been a while since our last webinar training session. And if you already signed up last week, apologies since I was sick. I'm still recovering, but good enough to do a webinar. And today I have an amazing amount of new features, awesome news. So let's get started. And as usual, I would like you to write any comments in the event comments if you have any questions. And depending on our time, I might be able to answer live or later after the session. And let me share my screen. I decided to today also show a tiny slideshow because I want to go through the different scaling options that you have with Earthster. So with Earthster, you're able to do LCAs at scale in a true level, meaning, for example, one of our clients that we did a joint project with, in 3 weeks, we generated more than 50,000 product specific LCAs. 50,000 models, not 100 or 10, no, 50,000. And that's I have many feature updates related to the generator. That's what we call the generator. For example, now the speed to generate those models based on your bill of materials is 1,000 LCA models in 4 minutes. Of course, for that you have to have the data in a good enough format to be able to do that, but I'll show you how the generator works. And as usual, we start the webinar with going through some basics, how to use Earthster, then the new features, and in the really end, if you have any questions, we can go through those also. So, what do we mean when we talk about doing LCAs at scale? We have three core, let me click here. We have three core features that enables you to do LCAs at scale. And the one I mentioned that you can create 50,000 models with is what we call the generator. The generator uses your own, or you use your own bill of materials. And for example, I show here an example. Here is a file that I actually asked Gemini, the AI, to generate for me. It's a pretend bill of materials of 20 different plastic products and inputs related to it to manufacture those products. And exactly, so with the generator, your goal is that you use your existing bill of materials to create the models. The replicator, also, you can use an Excel template, but it's more about the concept of you have one so-called template model where you create endless amount of variations of the same product. For example, imagine you have a plastic product with different dimensions, different specifications, how big it is. The replicator might be a better alternative than the generator. And the last one that I love showing is, although it's not a scaling feature, but with the copy paste, you can speed up your LCA work so much more. Because what you can do with our copy paste is you copy one part of your LCA model and paste it into another one, or within the same model, you can modify the values and it gives you a lot of options. So these are the three core features to do LCAs at scale. And let's see how it looks in Earthster. And just in case, I'm gonna check meanwhile if we have any comments already in LinkedIn. So I might be more. Exactly, this is what you notice. I don't know if you could hear it. Now I have both for me set up, being able to see the webinar itself and my stream. Let's go to Earthster. So, when you have an Earthster account, this is how it looks when you log in. And Earthster is designed for collaboration. So, for example, the goal is that not only the LCA experts who are using the LCA data in your own organization, but you could include in there even the salespeople that You as an expert create the models and they can export results for the clients without needing to ask you that, hey, can you give me the LCA results for this and this product? They can do it themselves. So it's designed in a way that you are able to do it. Now, I have here a workspace specifically created for today's demo so that we don't have extras in here. And since I'm most excited about the generator, I would say let's get started with that. The file I have already created is trying to be an average bill of materials for 20 products. And here you can see the column. The first one is called cycle. It's going to be the system will create this LCA model with this name. It has a depth structure that normally you have in your bill of materials. For example, you have one component and that has multiple inputs to create that component. And you could have thousands of inputs for a model. For example, if you're doing a complex electronics or machinery, you use the same type of file structure as this one. In this case, these are just simple examples to show you how it works. And all these columns, what the system recognizes some of them automatically based on most commonly used bill of material names. For example, depth, component, value, and unit all comes from what normally you find in bill of material exports. And the rest that the system doesn't recognize as default values, it's going to add them as description. And let me show you what happens with this. So what I'm going to do is export my model as a CSV file. You could also use an Excel, but what's important in those, when you do use an Excel, remember that the system considers only the first sheet. So if you have multiple sheets and the last one is your generator that you use, for example, filters or VLOOKUPs to create the correct structure, it's better to download it as a CSV because the CSV only takes the actual one sheet, comma separated values. Now I have the file, and what we are going to do is upload all that into Earthster. So generate 20 models. And this feature, so the generator and the replicator, is only available in our corporate level subscription. You click here. So in the workspace where you want to create the LCA models, you click on the drop-down menu and you click Generate Cycles from File. We click here, we drag the CSV file that I just downloaded. I put it like this, and then I'm going to tell it to upload and generate it. Now you'll see the first step. So the system is showing us a plan. What it's going to do? It's going to create 20 new models, and it's telling me that I'm missing mappings. What are the mappings? The mappings is a list of wording that you use in your bill of materials translated into LCA data. So if we are looking at all these names appear in my bill of materials as the components, as the inputs. And now if we map these inputs, from that onwards, the system is going to take that whenever in my bill of materials it says polypropylene granulate in Europe, because it's geography specific, it's gonna use the one we are gonna map it to. Let me show you. We create here, create mappings. So what we're doing is translating bill of material terminology into LCA terminology. And these mappings work in a way that you can map it either to an existing own LCA model, one of your own because you have created already, for example, the factory-specific energy usage, and you can use those or straight connect it to a dataset. For example, in this case, these are most likely to be either PEF datasets or equipment. And as you can see, the system is suggesting a dataset that sounds similar. Now, if it's the right one that it checks, you can see from here click on the information icon to see which one it's using. Look, for example, here, this is a PEF dataset. And here you see the release versions and all the information the database provider has provided about that particular dataset. So for example, we could say that this polyethylene production, not a good one. We are gonna change this to something else. And we are gonna look for a better match for that mapping. For example, I would say this one sounds perfect for it. This is an EcoInvent dataset. I click here, go to cycle, and now this input is mapped to this one. Before you can use the generator, you need to map all these namings that you use in your bill of materials. Once you have that, you can generate all those things. And now to make this faster, what I'm going to do is just accept all of them, even if it's weird data, we are not going to care. And for this, we are going to we do it like this. Find a good data set, for example, EcoInvent. This could be a good one. And then also here, we are gonna say nylon. Nylon 6. And here is, for example, this one, European one. Now our mappings are done. This is done. Everything, you can see which ones have been already mapped. I have many, or you can see if there's anything pending. You can navigate easily in Earthster by clicking on the Earthster logo here in the middle, and then you will go back to the dashboard view or workspace view. And now what we're going to do, since we have all the mappings done, we are going to actually create those 20 models. Look, generate cycles from file. Then I drag in there the same file we already downloaded. Here, like this. Upload and generate. And that's telling us it's going to do 20. As you can see, it's not asking for mappings anymore. It's done. And I say execute plan. And now this generation is what I mentioned, 1,000 cycles in 4 minutes. And as you can see, it's already done. I close this. Here you see all the different products that we have generated based on the Excel file I had. Here, all the inputs with the different values. This is how they look as LCA models. And for example, if we open the first one, the bottle itself, water bottle, the inputs are from AI, so might be totally wrong, but it sounded like pretty good estimate how an average per bottle is produced. And here you can see that it follows the structure that we have defined in the bill of materials. We said that this is an input for the PET, and then we have a bundle with these inputs. And this is how the model looks. This is the input straight away. You can see that it uses EcoInvent, the one that we mapped to the model, and blow molding process is the bundle and has these inputs. Simple, isn't it? And now imagine, that's the thing, that if you have your bill of materials in a really good order, it's as simple as exporting your bill of materials and uploading into Earthster. Whether it's thousands of products you want to import or just one super specific, you can do it with the same file. And the great part, what the generator does, is that you use this same file to update the existing models. For example, if you change any of the values later, what happens is that the system will check how many needs to be updated. You remember seeing the plan? It says creating, updating, or leaving as is. Now, if we change, for example, let's change the value to more kilos. Let's say it's a bit bigger bottle. We keep everything as is. Now I export again the CSV file. This has only one update. And then we can use the same to update the existing models. Like this. And 20 will be updated. Exactly. That's so with the plan, you can always check what's going to happen to your models and then update or not, or you decide, or you can, whether you're going to do it or not. Okay. Any questions about the generator? or in general. Let me see if I see any comments. Looks like we don't have any comments. No. Okay, then let's go forward. So if we go to my slides, the generator. So the main solution is to use your existing data in a format as is. If your production information is not organized, you can also create different Excels that fetches the data from different files, or for example, with scripts, you're able to create the right format. But your goal is that if your data is in a good format, you use the generator. And I do not recommend to create this structure if you would have to be typing everything by hand. I do it really often in my demos to show what kind of information you can add, but I do not recommend it. It's better than to model in Earthster manually because it's designed for that too, so that your LCA modeling is enjoyable. Now, exactly. So the generator allows you to create tens of thousands of product-specific LCA models using either your own LCA models, base models as a kind of like as building blocks, or straight away datasets from other databases. Then, if you're still talking about scale, the next one is the replicator. And the replicator is, I would say, even easier to use than the generator, because what you need to have is what we call a template cycle. A good example that I have already in my workspace is if you want to model factory-specific processing with primary data. For example, in this super simple model, I have added electricity high voltage from Europe, and I have added into the description hashtag electricity. If I go here, heat, natural gas, points to an echo invent dataset, and I have hashtagged it as heat, hashtag heat. These hashtags are what the generator uses to update the values, meaning that this is my factor-specific processing where I'm only having inputs as electricity and natural gas, but you could add there diesel consumption, anything else that you know the information in your factory per that manufacturing machine. For example, injection molding would be one of those. Now, if you don't have the information per one machine manufacturing, like injection molding 1 kilo of plastic, what you do in those cases is take your whole year production, divide it by the amount of products produced, whether it's per unit or per kilo, and then you add the results proportionally. That's one way of getting information if you don't have machine-specific information. But those are good practices done in LCA that you can use. Now, so this is our template. It's a simple one. We have 2 hashtags. The cool part that is we can export this as a replicator template because it looks a bit different. You click on export. You choose the report type as cycle replicator template. We click here. We export it as a CSV or Excel, whichever you prefer. I like it as CSV, and click generate report. Now this, what we exported, is the simple, sorry, I'm opening things that I don't want because it's an Excel file. Let me show you here. The file contains only the column called name, heat, and electricity. And what I'm going to do is just copy these sections and add it to my webinar demo here. This is how we, copying didn't work the way I expected. Then we are going to break it down. Look, the replicator you can also create by hand, but of course, when you export it as an Excel, it's easier. So, how does the replicator work? It uses the hashtags to update the value where the description. So if this hashtags appears here, it will update the value of 1.5 kilowatt hours. And it can create for us many different examples. For example, we are going to say processing 1. And let's see if it's smart enough. Yes. And then we say 1.2, 1.5 to 0, 6. And this information, so this is what I mean. Now I'm typing these by hand, but you have it somewhere. And if not, you can get the information per factory and you normalize it to have the right way. And look, for example, 5, 6, all these things, you add the values. And what this is going to do, such a simple table, we are going to create 6 models with these names. It's going to update these values. If your model, for example, would have parameters, you could add the parameter like this. For example, at for example, look, production, I would do it like this, production amount. If that, does not like it. Exactly. Try to avoid the smartness of Excel and Google spreadsheets, but what you add is the @ sign. When you have already in your model a parameter, when you export it, it will show up. And you are able to update the active value of the parameter. Now let me export this. We download this again as a CSV. Go back to Earthster. And now what we are going to do is take this model as the template. So in the cycle settings, I click into settings. Here in the bottom, you have this option if you have the corporate plan. You say replicate in bulk, and you could also export the template from here. But if replicate in bulk, now we add the file that I just exported. Here, we have the new one. Upload and replicate. It says the file is being processed. And now if we go out here to the workspace, we start seeing already the different versions of the processing machines done. And the values are updated accordingly. Now, what I would recommend if you really want to create 50,000 cycles or more product SKUs is do this first. So especially if you want factory-specific environmental data, you create the machines, you issue releases, and then you'll use this instead of what in my models are saying here. Let me show you. Here, for example, it says specifically heat and electricity. So instead of adding an equipment dataset, I will be adding my own dataset. But this is up to you, how you model your LCA models. Like this. And now I have here in total 28 models. What I would do to make sure, it's really important if you use your own models in other ones, in other cycles, is to have a release. It's your version control. It's kind of like taking your LCA model, your cycles is your Word document, and the release is equivalent of taking a PDF. And when you're using one cycle in another one, this cycle is recognizing it based on the so-called PDF, the release, and it's connected with that. The system will let you add draft models, but it will not be connected correctly. So remember, issue a release and then add your models. And the simplest way to do it, especially when you organize your LCA models in a workspace in a logical way, for example, all the manufacturing processing in one workspace, another one, your raw materials, your supplier materials. And this is up to you how you want to divide the data, but I recommend using different workspaces to group your LCA models to keep them organized. Look, so we have these amount of cycles, and if I want to create a new release for all of them, I click on the drop down and I click issue a new release for all cycles. This will issue a new release for every single one of them. If I don't want to do that, if I would want to do only these models, the new ones, for example, I can select them. And then I click here, release selected cycles. I click here. I can add the cycle nodes, for example, replicated based on my demo Excel. The notes are for you to remember what has happened in the modeling, and if you're working with other people, to know that, okay, what has been the changes. It's not mandatory, but it's really, really recommended. We click here, and now it's going to do the releases for all these. What I do is reload the page, and now you can see that it's no longer in draft mode. These are ready to be used in another model. And now if we would use the release all cycles, what it does, it checks which is the smallest release, it just add new. You can rename this, you could call it bulk release. And then what I like my personal doing is doing this. So I know what happened, that I'm just doing a new release, and confirm. And what it's going to do, doing the same thing, it's done. We reload the page, and every single model now has at least one release or more, because these models will have two. Look, if we go into releases here, you'll see the evolution of your model. We didn't change anything, we just issued a new release. But for example, this is an amazing way to keep track of what happened to your LCA models, especially when you're doing database updates. And I have the best news ever. Just today, we have released the newest version of EcoInvent. And you'll see in my models, if I go to data sources, the moment I created these examples, it was using version 3.11. And now the system is telling me that there is an update available. And this is the data sources is where you decide whether you want to keep your model as is or you want to update it. What I recommend before you update the EcoInvent datasets, issue a release, and you can even call the release like that with EcoInvent 3.11 and the new one with 3.12. And now let's see what we do, how to do this. Sorry. This model, processing 6, used only these two datasets. So that's what you see in the data sources. If I would have here data from my own organization, it would show up as called Heine. My organization is called Heine. And any other data sources. So for example, you have a dataset from PEF, it would show up as its own. You can configure automatic updates if you would want to. So it's on the top, or just do them manually. So what I like to do, you go here. So even though there is a new EcoInvent version 3.12, you're the one who needs to decide that do you want to apply the new changes, the new versions of the dataset to your model. In most of the cases, you do. But for example, if you have a model that you created based on a research paper that used specific releases, maybe it's not worth doing the update. You click here, update all. We do it like this. Now the system already updated. And if we go here, we see it's up to date. And now the coolest thing is if you had the releases, we can see the difference in the environmental impact. With 3.11, it was 2.59, and with 3.12, the impact is 2.73. So newer data increase in our environmental impact. And this is something to be conscious that newer data doesn't always mean lower impact, but in some cases, the data will be better, and in some cases, it will be worse from an environmental impact perspective. But of course, the goal of EcoInvent is always to give you the best available data possible, and you can read more about the database update from our documentation. We have already the documentation page. You can write, for example, EcoInvent 3.12. Let's see what it finds. Here is the release notes. This information is from EcoInvent. You can see what has changed, what are the new updates, or you can click here and you go straight away to EcoInvent's own release notes. But I'm super excited about that. So that happened just today. And once again, we are the first one to implement the newest version of EcoInvent in an LCA tool. And we are proud of it. Any questions related to these new features, or actually what I just showed? Looks like we have a quiet audience today. I hope that's a good news. Okay, so back to, now you know how to use the replicator. There's documentation pages on our documentation, and of course that's one of those things that if you want to start using these features, send me a message and I'll show you how to do it. Then the last one is the copy paste. I really love it, and I know many of you love the feature. Let me show you what you can do with the copy paste. What you can do is select one or multiple of the inputs that you want to copy. You click here on the top, copy, and then you paste it where you want. Now, for example, if these same inputs would make sense to add it into distribution, I open the stage, click on the drop down, and I click paste. It will take whatever I had in there, add them here, with the description and everything. As you can see, it's an exact match what happened. The same thing happens if we create, for example, a new cycle. I'm just going to call it demo. We are going to remove this, create the cycle, and I paste the information here. This is an amazing way that you can reuse your own models. You have created somewhere a cool structure to represent your product, and then you decide to paste it somewhere else. Super useful. And now look what happens if the same data, we paste it into a spreadsheet. Click here. This is how the data looks like. Let me show you. This is the, what would I say? The backbone of the copy paste. Column, the first column says type, defines what is the input. F refers to a flow, B is bundle, like this, and C is custom process, and E is exchange. Here you can see the name refers to what name is going to show up here. The reference, this one, refers to the actual data set, what it's going to be connecting to. And then the value and the unit comes from here, the value and the unit of the data set you're using. And let me go back here, and then ID, that's needed to be able to paste. Parent refers to these IDs. So for example, now if we add here a new bundle called energy, we are going to say value 1, just like this, 1 unit. We leave this empty. ID is 3. And then, look, here we can add that those go into 3. And that's good. And look what happens. We paste this whole table. Actually, we can even change the values. 4.5, and that's going to be 5. We copy and paste back into Earthster. And I'm going to put it here just so that you see the difference. We click paste. And it didn't like the order that I created them in. This is one of the tricky parts with using the copy paste, that you have to make sure the values are in the right order. So look, 1, 2, 3, and we put these into 1. The system will tell you if you did something wrong, but there are really useful moments to do this. Look, I copy now again, go back, paste, and now it created a new bundle called energy. In there are the 2 inputs that we defined and with the values. And now another cool trick, that many of you don't know, what happens is, for example, if you remove the reference because you don't know, or you want to create something else, end of life, we could, electricity doesn't make sense, plastic waste, and then here we would put steel waste. Imagine you had the inputs in your production, you copied those, you have the same names as you want, you remove the references, and you want to create a simple way, the end of life version, you could use this. And now let me show you what happens if we paste the data without reference. I click again, paste. Now, what the data is telling me that, okay, great, we know what to paste, but since we don't have the reference, it doesn't know what dataset to use. So in here, this is, I need to tell it that for plastic waste, use a specific dataset. This sounds like the generator mapping. The only difference is that these are temporary. So I decide to choose this, for example, now. I can check the dataset, change it to different one. And if I like them, I just click paste and import. And if I don't, we can look for another dataset from the database. And if you don't want to map it to a dataset, you can skip it and it becomes an empty custom process. Let me show you. We have this, paste and import. Now, if I would do this again, look, now we have the plastic weight with the end of life dataset. There are super awesome ways of using the copy paste. That's why I wanted to show you. But of course, that requires that you are editing one model at a time and you're creating, for example, you could create your templates or all those things. Generator is for doing models in here. Let's go back. So generator create thousands of models with a file. Replicator, similar style, you create from one template model. So the model that you want to create copies of, you can create thousands of variations also. For example, with you have a plastic product and the only thing changes is the different dimensions, might be faster to use. And the copy paste, you can do awesome things by allowing you to copy parts of your LCA model, paste it into another one, or even to have spreadsheets and back and forth. There's many awesome things. Any questions? We have about 20 minutes left and I have many things to show you. Let's go back to Earthster. Okay, just double checking. There is no comments in the event itself. So one thing that I mentioned, so since our last webinar, the generator now takes also, let me show you, here's another example of the file, how it could look. You can specify also the type, the same terminology, B for bundle, C for custom process, F for flow. By default, it assumes that it's a flow. And you can specify the stage. Before, when you generated models, everything always ended up the production stage. Now you can say that, oh, I want this information in distribution or end of life, so the use stage. By default, it's production. All the nodes, scale units, you can use multiple, and this is how you use the generator. So that's one of the feature updates. Then, an awesome feature, specifically when you have already the thousands of models, or even if you have only 100. You don't have to have thousands, even though I like saying it. What you can do is export the results per cycle. So you could export one by one. You go to export, you choose the type of release, which one you want to export, or the live one, which means the current state of the model, and you choose the LCA, the report type you want to export. This you have to do one by one. The new feature we have added is the ability to export the whole workspace. Particularly useful when you have many models and you want to see on an overview what's the total impact for that given model. You click here, you choose the environmental impact method where you want. So for example, if you want IPCC, you choose the total, and I would choose biogenic, these two, or all of them if you want. You choose the format, how you want to export. Makes sense to export it as Excel, CSV, even PDF would work, depending on how many rows you have. And then we are going to export it. And the system is calculating now the IPCC results for all those models that we have. And it says it's done. And let me show you the results. This is the simple export. You see the name of the cycle and the two impact results we have selected. Super quick way of seeing the results for all your models. So you do it by export workspace contents. That's one of the things you can do. And of course, depending on which one you can export is based on whether you have a full eco-inventory license or not. So you need one. And let me see, what else? Ooh, yes. We have a new concept called dimensions. And it sounds cool. What it truly is a group of tags. If you've been using tags already, you know that you're able to see your tags in the review panel. Here is an example where I have an EPD style, my toaster oven, and this is how the tags look like. I have added into these models some few tags. And now, for example, if I want to tag A1 with the tag A1, I could click here, go here in the info, and this is the section where you add tags. What you can do is just start typing, and look, this is the magic we have added. It appears that there is a dimension called the EN standard, and it already has the one A1. I can click here, and now I'm using one tag straight away from a dimension. The dimensions you find in settings, you click to the cycle settings and click here, custom dimensions. These are the ones that the system detected automatically. So you're doing an EPD, there's already the existing tags to tag your cycles so that you can use those in a comparison, for example, to analyze your results in an easier way. And there will be soon the ability that you can export your results based on the tags instead of the actual structure that your cycle has. Then we have by default added the greenhouse gas protocol scopes, scope 1, 2, and 3, and the extended change stages, raw materials, manufacturing, distribution. Now I can add my own. I click here, new dimension. For example, I call it eco design. This is up to me how to call it. And then here I can predefine tags I want. For example, material. I click enter, then energy, enter. What else we want to know for eco design? Transport. Like this. I have now created 3 tags. I save it. It appears here. This is my own. I can edit it, add new ones. And what I can do now is when I start typing here, I can put here, for example, plastic cover. I add here the material, or actually I would add the injection molded. So on the info level, look, material. It auto-suggests. I click it, and now the beauty why to use the dimensions, so the tag groups, is when you create a comparison, for example here, you can create those divisions with those clicks, with one click. Look, in the divisions, by default, you see the stages, the impact results broken down based on the stages. You click on the edit. Instead of clicking add new to add a specific division, I click on the drop down and create them from dimension. I click here, and now I can choose the ones existing or my own. Here you see that the system says that, oh, there is one tag used from this group, and also there's one from this group. So for example, let's use the eco design one. I click here, it auto-generates all the tags and shows the result based on that. And clearly, let me see, it says no division, updating in, yeah, because we have not added the tags in the right place. So there's no results. But this is how you use the dimensions. You use the tags, and with one click, you create the whole group. So you don't have to remember that, which ones I had in there, because you're, of course, able to create them by hand. You click Add New. And this is something interesting with the divisions. You can search for the tags, the input names, and any of your structure. For example, bundles and custom processes. Let me show you. So when you create them by hand, it says includes, and what do we have in our model? A1. I can, look, it's suggesting me processes including A1. If I choose this one, every single data set or input that has the text A1 in it will be included in the division. The second one is the processes tagged. So those little tags that we were using a moment ago. And the last one, A1 raw materials, refers to the bundle I have in my model. And in this case, I would want to take that. We take here, we can choose a different color, especially if you don't like what the system is suggesting. You rename it A1. We can call it like this, raw material supply. That's how it shows up on the model. And then you click Create Division. Now we have added a new one, as you can see, that's the proportion of the total cycle for that given division. The cool part is that once you have these divisions, you can also export the results. Look, I can download this as a graph. If you want to be able to add these to, for example, PowerPoint presentations, use the PNG version because the SVG is not supported in PowerPoint presentations. Or if you download it as a CSV, what you get is a table with your impact results for every single division that you have. So the same information exported as kilos of CO2 equivalent in the given category that we have used. So those are cool ways of analyzing your data. You can create these divisions much faster, but you're able to use them by hand. Let me go back here. Any questions related to dimensions, which is the same thing as a group of tags? And looks like no questions. Now let me check my notes. What do I still need to show? Exactly. Oh, yes. New things. Since we've been focusing to implement more and more features to help you do EPDs at scale, not only one by one. For example, in here we have this model divided based on the typical modules, but we are thinking for the future that when you have those 10,000 SKUs, maybe you want to add some of those into EPDs. What we have implemented recently is the ability to add documentation in a workspace level. I'll show you that in a moment. But before that, a new update also is that before you had the cycle notes, which is the same thing as the dataset summary. Here you can add images, pictures, and where you describe the scope of your model. The documentation section, you can go more specific and document every aspect of your model. And what's cool with this model is that it takes rich text. You click on the existing section or you create new ones, and you can add bullet points, images, and all those things. And I actually have one for the water bottle, what I wanted to show you. Here we have the water bottle. We add a new documentation section. Here I click Add New, and I'm gonna call it like this, Product image. We add here a product image. Look, we have my downloads. Where is my water bottle? Here. Open. That's it. And now when I save this, this will be part of the documentation. Really, really useful to, especially if you're doing an LCA report, an EPD report, any of those. Document the main assumptions in the cycle itself. And since now it's more usable, you can make it prettier and export the data in a better way. Now, if we go back here, so we have the documentation sections. This is what, for example, you can do. You have the normal ISO documentation sections, and you could add system boundary includes only cradle to gate. And we can add bullet points and all those things. The system autosaves everything, and we are able to export this as a documentation. And soon you will be able to export in a Word format. At the moment, only HTML, which you can import into a Word document. You click here, and it will export every single section you have. Now, so documentation is cooler. You can add links, images, rich text to make it more as an actual LCA report you would be writing. And the one thing that I mentioned is in the workspace, look, we are in my demo workspace. I can add a documentation section. This section looks exactly the cycle one, but will be applied to all the models. Really useful if you have divided your LCA models based on, for example, product categories, groups, however you want, and you can create these sections for everything related in that cycle. For example, we could, thinking about EPDs, you could create a company information. Wait, what did I do? Company information, like this. That's going to be the title of the section. Here I can write whatever I want. Earthster. Oh, what did I write? I still don't know how to write our own company name. And then you can say dun, dun, dun. And all this information is when you want it to be exported with your reports. For example, if you have the same system boundary, which assumptions you have, all those things you can add if it applies to all your models. And that's it. We just click out. Everything is saved. And now this is part of the whole workspace documentation. And we are able, you can just click update the workspace or click out. It's auto-saved anyway. And then when we export the documentation, all the documentation sections should appear in there. Documentation, we take it this time as a PDF. It makes sense. Generate report. It's done. And let me show you what's the content of it. Look, these are the different scopes that we have added. The titles and the content. We didn't have any documentation sections. And this is how it looks. Super cool. And that's as a PDF. So it's a really good way of documenting your models, especially when you want to export results to give it to your clients, for example. You write there the information needed for a one-pager, and all of those can be included in the normal exports. Now we have super little time left. Any questions? Looks like not. No questions. So, shared documentation sections for the whole organization. In general, the cycle documentation section got much nicer and improved. You can reorder these and add rich text, which helps you also for your colleagues to see what is part of your LCA model and what's not. Then one of the biggest news is Echo Invent 3.12 is out, and you can update your models. You go to the data sources section, And you can either update them one by one or all of them together. And this is a great example. Here it says there's one deprecated model, which means that this particular dataset no longer exists in the new version. And since this is a really common dataset, that means that probably the global version has changed. So technically, EchoInvent assumes that it's no longer the same dataset, and it wants you to select something else. As you can see, there's many more regions that you can select from. And that's what a deprecated dataset means. Otherwise, when it's just a new version available from the same one, you can update, and you can decide to update them one by one or all at the same time. Good. And then I'm pretty sure since our last webinar, we have even more little feature updates here and there. But I wanted to showcase you, highlight the most important ones. And if any of these features that I showed you, you need help how to use it, send me a message at hi@earthster.org. This is my email address, or you can send also a message on our in-app chat. You click here, chat with us. You can use the existing chat or create a new one, and then we get back to you. You'll find a lot of useful information in the documentation section. You just click here. You can search for an article or click around and see what there is. For example, LCA methodology and data. Here are really useful documentation how to do LCAs, more information about the databases. This we need to update. Now the latest version is 3.12, just updated today. And I would say that's it for today. I really thank you that you joined me today. If you have any questions, get in touch. You can send some of the questions in the event comments, or get in touch with us, and we help you do LCAs at scale, in a huge scale or in small case. It's up to you. What are your LCA needs? We are here to help you in both cases. And for example, additional services, if you're interested, we offer professional support where we can help you with your LCA modeling questions, or even do project-based LCA projects. So if you need something to be done by someone else, you don't have the in-house capability or the time to do it, get in touch and we'll get you a project quote. Thank you for this, and see you next time.